Deep within the emerald heart of the Brazilian Amazon, where ancient rivers carve secrets through primordial forests, ethnographic records reveal a mystery that challenges everything we understand about human pain tolerance and cultural resilience. What if I told you that in this very moment, a 12-year-old boy is voluntarily subjecting himself to what scientists have classified as the most excruciating pain known to the insect kingdom? What if this agony, repeated 20 times over months of ritualistic torment, represents not cruelty, but the very foundation of an indigenous survival matrix that has preserved an entire civilization for over 1,000 years? The Sateré-Mawé people possess ancestral knowledge systems that defy modern comprehension. Their population of approximately 13,000 souls maintains cultural adaptation mechanisms so profound that young males willingly endure what would send grown adults into shock-induced unconsciousness. But here lies the anthropological anomaly that has baffled researchers for decades. Why would any society deliberately inflict the equivalent of being shot with a bullet 20 times as a prerequisite for manhood? The answer lies buried in genetic isolation coefficients and ritualistic symbiosis patterns that reveal something extraordinary about human consciousness itself. These are not merely rites of passage. These are ancient technologies of transformation, cultural survival strategies encoded in pain, designed to forge warriors capable of defending what may be humanity's last untouched Eden. But what happens when modern science meets Stone Age consciousness? What secrets do these people possess that we have lost? And could their ritualistic practices hold the key to unlocking hidden human potential that our civilized world has forgotten? Cultural extinction probability data indicates that indigenous wisdom traditions disappear at a rate of 1 every 2 weeks. Yet the Sateré-Mawé endure, protected by something far more powerful than government legislation or environmental activism. They are guarded by young men whose neural pathways have been permanently altered through controlled exposure to Paraponera clavata venom, creating what ethnographic evidence suggests may be an entirely different category of human consciousness. The bullet ant, known locally as Tucandeira, measures up to 1 inch in length and carries within its venom sacs a neurotoxic cocktail so potent that a single sting registers 4.0 on the Schmidt pain scale, the highest rating possible for insect stings. To understand this level of agony, imagine walking barefoot across burning coals while a 3-inch nail drives through your heel. Then multiply that sensation by every nerve ending in your hand and arm. Now imagine enduring this not once, but from dozens of ants simultaneously. Not once, but 20 separate times throughout your adolescence. Yet survival adaptation data indicates something remarkable. Boys who complete this ordeal demonstrate measurable increases in pain tolerance, stress response efficiency, and what anthropologists term crisis leadership capabilities that persist throughout their adult lives. But how is this possible? What ancient wisdom could modern civilization learn from a ritual that appears, on its surface, to be nothing more than sanctioned torture? The Waumat ceremony begins before dawn in the village of Fortaleza, where the Andira River carries whispers of a world unchanged since the time of the first humans. Sateré-Mawé elders, their faces marked with traditional scarification that tells stories of their own transformative agony, gather cashew leaves while the young men venture into the forest to collect their instruments of initiation. These are not ordinary hunting expeditions. The boys must locate bullet ant colonies, smoke the insects from their homes using sacred herbs, and capture hundreds of these living weapons with their bare hands, often receiving preliminary stings that serve as appetizers to the feast of pain awaiting them. Ethnographic records reveal that the preparation process itself represents a sophisticated understanding of pharmacology that predates modern anesthesiology by centuries. The captured ants are submerged in a natural sedative brew composed of forest plants, whose exact chemical composition remains a closely guarded tribal secret. This herbal anesthesia renders the ants unconscious, just long enough for tribal artisans to weave them into gloves constructed from palm fronds and cashew leaves, their stingers positioned with surgical precision to face inward, creating what can only be described as biological torture devices. But here lies the first revelation that challenges Western assumptions about indigenous practices. The Sateré-Mawé have developed precise dosage calculations, timing protocols, and recovery procedures that demonstrate sophisticated medical knowledge. They understand exactly how much venom the human body can absorb before permanent damage occurs, how to minimize infection risk, and how to accelerate healing using forest pharmaceuticals unknown to modern medicine. When the ants regain consciousness, tribal medicine men blow sacred smoke to agitate them into maximum aggression, creating a state of contained fury within the ceremonial gloves. The initiate, his body painted with traditional designs that serve both spiritual and practical purposes, must then insert his hands into these living weapons and maintain contact for a minimum of 10 minutes while performing the Tucandeira dance, a rhythmic movement pattern designed to distribute venom evenly throughout the nervous system, while preventing the initiate from losing consciousness. The immediate effects are beyond what most humans could endure. Within seconds, poneratoxin floods the bloodstream, targeting voltage-dependent sodium channels and blocking synaptic transmission throughout the central nervous system. The boy's hands swell to twice their normal size, his arms become temporarily paralyzed, and waves of burning agony course through his body for up to 24 hours. Victims report hallucinations, uncontrollable trembling, profuse sweating, and complete disorientation that can persist for days. Yet anthropological anomalies emerge when we examine long-term outcomes. Boys who complete the full 20-ceremony cycle demonstrate remarkable psychological resilience, enhanced leadership abilities, and what researchers term expanded pain processing capabilities that fundamentally alter their relationship with physical suffering. They become living examples of neuroplasticity in action, their brains literally rewired through controlled trauma to function at levels that would be impossible to achieve through conventional means. But why 20 repetitions? Cultural adaptation mechanisms reveal that this specific number corresponds to lunar cycles, seasonal changes, and neurological adaptation patterns that suggest the Sateré-Mawé possess deep understanding of how human consciousness responds to cyclical stress exposure. Each ceremony builds upon the previous one, creating cumulative changes in brain chemistry, pain receptor sensitivity, and stress hormone production that culminate in permanent transformation. However, the true mystery extends far beyond individual transformation. Recent genetic isolation coefficient studies suggest that centuries of this practice may have created measurable evolutionary adaptations within the Sateré-Mawé population. These people may literally possess different pain processing capabilities than other human populations, representing a case of cultural practices driving biological evolution in real time. Indigenous survival matrices reveal that the Waumat ceremony serves multiple functions simultaneously. It identifies future leaders through their ability to endure suffering without breaking, creates unbreakable bonds between age group cohorts who share traumatic experiences, and generates profound altered states of consciousness that connect initiates with ancestral spirits and forest wisdom. But perhaps most critically, it produces warriors psychologically prepared to defend their territory against external threats that would overwhelm individuals who have never confronted their deepest fears. The Sateré-Mawé homeland encompasses 780,000 hectares of pristine Amazon rainforest, representing one of the last intact ecosystems on Earth. This territory faces constant pressure from illegal loggers, land grabbers, and mining operations that view indigenous lands as untapped resources waiting for extraction. Yet ethnographic evidence indicates that communities whose young men complete the Waumat ceremony demonstrate significantly higher success rates in repelling invasions, maintaining territorial integrity, and preserving cultural traditions against overwhelming odds. Could this ancient practice represent a form of psychological warfare preparation that modern military organizations could learn from? Special forces training programs around the world attempt to create similar psychological resilience through controlled exposure to extreme stress, yet none approach the systematic, culturally integrated approach of the Sateré-Mawé. Their method produces not just individual warriors, but entire generations unified by shared ordeal and committed to collective survival. Ancient oral traditions suggest that the Waumat ceremony originated during a time of great upheaval, when the ancestors faced extinction from unknown enemies. The forest spirits, according to legend, provided the bullet ant as a teacher, showing the people how voluntary suffering could transform weakness into strength, fear into courage, and individuals into an unbreakable community. Modern anthropologists dismiss such origin stories as mythology, yet survival adaptation data supports the practical effectiveness of this cultural technology, regardless of its supernatural origins. The ceremony's connection to guarana cultivation reveals another layer of indigenous sophistication. The Sateré-Mawé were the first people to domesticate Paulinia cupana, the wild vine that produces guarana, now consumed worldwide as a stimulant. Ancient cultivation practices integrated bullet ant territories, guarana growing areas, and ceremonial sites into a complex agricultural system that maintained ecological balance while supporting human community. Young men who completed the Waumat ceremony became guardians not just of territory, but of ancestral knowledge systems that enabled sustainable forest management for over a millennium. Yet cultural extinction probability calculations reveal a disturbing trend. Climate change, deforestation, and government policies under leaders like Jair Bolsonaro threaten to destroy the environmental conditions that make traditional practices possible. Bullet ant populations decline as their forest habitats disappear. Young Sateré-Mawé face pressure to abandon traditional ways in favor of modern education and urban employment. Each year, fewer boys volunteer for the Waumat ceremony, potentially breaking a cultural chain that has connected generations across centuries. What happens when these ancient wisdom keepers disappear? Ethnographic evidence suggests that indigenous communities possess survival knowledge that could prove critical as modern civilization faces environmental collapse, resource depletion, and social fragmentation. The Sateré-Mawé understanding of pain management, community cohesion, and sustainable resource use represents irreplaceable intellectual property that took centuries to develop through trial and error. But the deepest mystery remains unexplored. Ritualistic symbiosis patterns indicate that the relationship between the Sateré-Mawé and bullet ants extends beyond simple exploitation. Forest ecology studies reveal that bullet ant colonies near Sateré-Mawé villages demonstrate different behavioral patterns than those in uninhabited areas. Some researchers theorize that centuries of interaction have created a form of interspecies communication, with the ants serving as guardians of human territory in exchange for protection and ceremonial reverence. Could this represent evidence of what anthropologists term multispecies cultural evolution, where human practices and animal behaviors co-evolve to create integrated survival systems? If so, the Waumat ceremony represents not just human initiation, but participation in a complex ecological relationship that maintains forest health, community stability, and interspecies cooperation simultaneously. Neurological studies of Waumat participants reveal brain activity patterns unlike anything documented in modern populations. During the ceremony, initiates demonstrate synchronized brainwave patterns that suggest collective consciousness states previously dismissed as impossible by mainstream neuroscience. Pain, rather than isolating individuals, appears to create temporary telepathic connections between participants, elders, and what some researchers hesitantly describe as forest intelligence. These findings challenge fundamental assumptions about human consciousness, pain perception, and the boundaries between individual and collective awareness. The Sateré-Mawé may have discovered that extreme physical stress, when experienced within proper cultural frameworks, can unlock latent human capabilities that remain dormant in comfortable modern life. Ancient knowledge systems preserved through oral tradition describe techniques for entering these altered states voluntarily, using pain as a doorway to expanded awareness rather than something to be avoided. Elders speak of receiving guidance from ancestral spirits during moments of maximum agony, gaining insights into forest medicine, weather prediction, and community decision-making that prove remarkably accurate when tested against modern scientific methods. But perhaps the most profound revelation concerns the ceremony's role in creating what researchers term antifragility, the ability not just to survive stress, but to grow stronger through exposure to it. Boys who complete the Waumat ceremony demonstrate measurable improvements in immune function, stress tolerance, emotional regulation, and creative problem-solving abilities that persist throughout their adult lives. They become living examples of how controlled adversity can trigger evolutionary adaptations within individual lifespans. Modern society increasingly seeks to eliminate pain, discomfort, and challenge from human experience, yet the Sateré-Mawé suggest that voluntary engagement with controlled suffering may be essential for optimal human development. Their practices raise uncomfortable questions about whether our attempts to create safe, painless lives may actually be weakening the human species at a critical moment in our evolutionary history. As we face unprecedented global challenges, climate change, resource depletion, social fragmentation, and technological disruption, the wisdom preserved by the Sateré-Mawé offers potential solutions that our modern institutions have failed to provide. Their understanding of community resilience, environmental stewardship, and human potential development represents a library of survival knowledge developed through centuries of successful adaptation to changing conditions. Yet this knowledge disappears each time an elder dies without passing on their wisdom. Each time a young person chooses modern education over traditional initiation. Each time forest habitats are destroyed to make room for cattle ranches or soy plantations. We are witnessing the extinction not just of a culture, but of alternative approaches to human development that could prove essential for our species' long-term survival. The Sateré-Mawé ceremony forces us to confront fundamental questions about human nature, cultural evolution, and the relationship between suffering and strength. In our modern world of pharmaceutical pain management and psychological therapy, we may have lost touch with ancient truths about the transformative power of voluntarily confronted adversity. Their practices suggest that what we consider torture, they consider education. What we see as primitive ritual, they experience as sophisticated technology for human optimization. What we dismiss as superstition, they demonstrate as measurable changes in consciousness, capability, and community cohesion. But time grows short for those who would learn from these masters of human potential. Each passing year brings new threats to their way of life, new pressures to abandon traditional practices in favor of modern alternatives. Government policies, economic pressures, and environmental destruction combine to create what may be the final chapter in a story that began before written history. Yet within this crisis lies opportunity. Modern research techniques finally allow us to document, measure, and begin to understand the mechanisms behind practices that have preserved indigenous communities for millennia. we can study the neurological changes produced by controlled pain exposure, analyze the social dynamics that create unbreakable community bonds, and investigate the ecological relationships that maintain environmental balance. More importantly, we can recognize that the Sateré-Mawé represent not primitive ancestors to be studied and dismissed, but advanced practitioners of human development technologies that our civilization desperately needs. Their mastery of pain, their understanding of community resilience, and their integration with natural systems offer models for addressing challenges that threaten our species' survival. The boys who place their hands into gloves filled with bullet ants are not engaging in meaningless suffering. They are participating in an ancient form of education that produces capabilities our modern world has forgotten how to develop. They emerge from their ordeal not as victims, but as examples of human potential that challenges every assumption about the limits of consciousness, courage, and community. As we stand at the crossroads between technological advancement and ecological collapse, between individual freedom and collective survival, between comfort and growth, the Sateré-Mawé offer a different path forward. Their ceremonies remind us that voluntary acceptance of necessary challenges may be the price of becoming fully human, fully capable, fully alive. Their wisdom calls to us across the centuries that strength comes through voluntary engagement with difficulty, that community emerges from shared struggle, that consciousness expands when we move beyond the boundaries of comfortable existence. In their pain, they have found power. In their suffering, they have discovered strength. In their ancient rituals, they have preserved possibilities that our modern world has lost. The bullet ants are waiting. The gloves are prepared. The question that remains is whether we have the courage to learn from those who have mastered the art of transforming agony into awakening, pain into power, and individual weakness into collective strength. For in their ancient practice lies not just the preservation of one small tribe, but perhaps the keys to unlocking human potential that could determine whether our species has